This is Stand Up for the Truth, addressing important issues and topics affecting Christians across the nation.
Hey there, it's Crash Connell, the last Friday in July 26, 2024. And so many times when we have our guest on, something goes wrong with our tech. So we're going to try one more new thing today and see if that works out. I'm not going to talk about it because I don't want anybody attacking it. Mary Danielsen is here, fresh new podcast.
Yes, welcome to Stand Up for the Truth for this Friday. We're welcoming back John Haller, and I'm looking forward to see what he's been watching. If we don't all lose our collective minds over headline overload, I'll be really surprised. But it just gets worse and worse, and so we're trying to keep up as best we are able. Scripture, Colossians 3:12-17. Therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, bearing with one another, and forgiving one another, if anyone has a complaint against another, even as Christ forgave you, so you also must do. But above all these things put on love, which is the bond of perfection. And let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to which also you were called in one body, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly in all wisdom, teaching, and admonishing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing with grace in your hearts to the Lord. And whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. Would you pray with me this morning? Oh Lord, you are gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, and rich in love, and we are nothing without you. We rejoice that we've been purchased by the precious blood of Jesus Christ to go forth to a hurting world, to proclaim freedom from sin and the promise of eternal life with you. Lord, this is just too wonderful for us to comprehend. Make us a thankful people. Help us to grab hold of all of this by faith and increase our faith, Lord, in troublesome times. We lift up John and his continued work for the kingdom. We ask for extra strength and endurance to accomplish all that you have given him to do. We lift up his family and his friends, for all needs to be met, Lord, and to finish well and with joy. In Jesus' name, amen. Pastor teacher John Haller, known for his weekly prophecy updates, a trial lawyer for almost 40 years, John serves as an elder at Fellowship Bible Chapel. His prophecy updates are available on the Fellowship Bible Chapel, FBC YouTube channel. John, unless, of course, they just cancel all of us, but welcome back to Stand Up for the Truth.
Good to be back with you.
Yeah. Boy, the second half of 2024 is fascinating. I want to ask you just out of the gate here before we get to a mountain of topics about this, what I call a tale of two speeches. You know, Biden broke up with America in 13 minutes. Not much pizzazz, no trumpets, no one in the room that we know of. And then Bibi, 55 standing ovations. I saw it as a picture of true leadership and diplomacy, someone who understands what's going on. John, I want to know what you think about these two significant speeches on the same day.
Well, so I thought that the Netanyahu speech was masterfully done. Mm-hmm. And what the other speech you asked me about was Biden's speech?
Mm-hmm. His breakup with America, yeah.
You assume that was Biden, right?
Well, on a technicality.
Well, I only asked the question because, when they sort of, he left the thing, he disappeared for a few days. And I'm not sure where he went. And a lot of people are concerned, is he still alive? Was there a medical emergency? Mm-hmm. And listen, so 2 weeks ago, this is kind of interesting. The Financial Times did a video. And on the video, they talked about the problem of deep fakes in politics. Mm-hmm. And they used an audio example in the video about a politician in the United States. And they said, listen to what this politician said. And then they said that was fake. And it's interesting that the person they chose to use as the example in that video was Joe Biden. Hmm. So, look, I think that Biden is bitter. I've never liked him. I've never trusted him. He's always been a sort of a self-centered politician. He's another one of these politicians that does stuff in the United States. He goes in, he's on a public servant's salary for 50 or 60 years, and he's worth tens of millions of dollars. I'm not sure how that happens in almost every case with long-serving politicians in the U.S. I know how it happens. Actually, there's a guy out there who's taken. She follows Nancy Pelosi's investments, the Pelosi family investments, and then invests that money for a fund that he's running, and he's making millions and millions of dollars because all of his trades are perfectly timed. So I don't have much respect for Joe Biden. I think that he's done a bunch of head fakes on Israel, which is a big deal with me. He says that he supports Israel, but the reality is that he's not. His whole administration, the third term of Barack Obama, is a pro-Iranian. They've given billions and billions of dollars to Iran. They've unwound sanctions on Iran. Iran has gone from selling 300,000 barrels of oil a day during the Trump administration to over 2 million barrels a day now during the Biden administration. So at the price of oil, that's lots and lots of money. That's 2 million barrels a day at, let's say $90 a barrel. So Iran is now sort of trying to take over the Middle East. They're causing a lot of problems. Everybody needs to know, and we can talk more about this in a minute. The war that Israel is now facing is a war with Iran. It's not a war against just Hezbollah or just Hamas in Gaza or just Hezbollah in Syria and Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis in Yemen. It is a war against Iran. Iran is behind every single one of these instances. So that's going to blow up in the very near future, I think. And I literally mean blow up into a much bigger war. Some of my sources in Israel are saying if there's no ceasefire in Gaza, that Israel's going into Lebanon in the next few days. Now that I don't know whether that'll happen. I thought that for months. So,
right.
But it's really going to explode, I think. I mean, Israel, one of the commanders in the north, the commander of the Israeli troops in the north today gave a talk to the Israeli troops and said that they've killed over 500 Hezbollah fighters since October 7th. That's I think more than they killed in a 37-day war where Israel actually invaded into Lebanon in 2006, known as the Second Lebanon War. I also want to point out Zaritza Havi from Alma Research, which is something that I think everybody should follow if you're concerned about Israel and the war in the north. It's israel-alma.org. She did an interview a couple of weeks ago, and she made an interesting point. If you go to the Almanar website, that's Hezbollah Media, open it in Chrome so you can get the translation. But if you look on the left side of the page, you'll see the Dome of the Rock. Click on that, and it will bring up a memorial page for every single Hezbollah fighter killed by the IDF since October 7th. This is in the north. This is not Hamas in Gaza. This is Hezbollah in Lebanon. And on every single memorial page, it has this phrase: on the road to Jerusalem, he was martyred on, and then it gives the date that he was killed. 500 of them now. Every single one of these says this. So as Zarit Zahavi from Alma pointed out, this is a war about the existence of Israel. This is a war about Jerusalem. This is a war about the Temple Mount. It might be being fought in Gaza. Mary, this is a long-standing thing. I interviewed a guy named Francisco Gil White a couple months ago, and he's a doctor, historian, evolutionary anthropologist. So I'm sure he's not a believer, but he's examined this. Said I was anti-Israel when I started, and I examined the truth, and I've now very pro-Israel. But starting with the Hajjaman al-Husseini back in the 1920s, all of these wars, fightings with Israel have all centered around Al-Aqsa. Now, there's a
Right.
Al-Aqsa Mosque in the Temple Mount,
Hmm.
but what they have done is they've expanded Al-Aqsa to include the entire Temple Mount. They claim that it has no connection with Israel. It is complete, total, made up propaganda. It is a lie. I can point you to Saudi Arabian historical sources that say Islam, this is not the site where Muhammad ascended to heaven. That was made up back in the 60s when, with the help of the Russians, a group of people was created out of whole cloth called the Palestinians. Before 1964, they never existed. So it was the Russians that did that. And they have all provoked Muslims to kill Jews by saying they're coming to destroy Al-Aqsa. It's a complete, total lie. There was a very famous massacre in Hebron in 1929 that was instigated by the Hajjman al-Husseini on exactly that basis. It continues today, and that's why they call this whole operation in Gaza, the whole one in Lebanon, and what's starting to become this operation within the West Bank that we know as Biblical Judea and Samaria. All of that is referred to Al-Aqsa flood.
Hmm. Hmm.
And they're coming after Israel and Jerusalem.
Wow. I'm glad that you explained that, John, because that's what I heard at the beginning of all of this in October already, that this was the name of it. And people were scratching their heads at the time what that might mean, but I'm glad you explained that. I'm talking to John Haller today on Stand Up for the Truth. I want to talk about, you talk about Iran. It's a global war, really, war by proxy. In the whole history of global warfare, I'm talking about history, proxy wars. I mean, the international community doesn't touch it. No one has anything to say about it. It's very alarming. They're also at war with us, the great Satan. I'm happy for Germany. Here's an article. Germany shuts down major Islamic center for serving as outpost for Iranian terrorists. They just shut down a major network of organizations around their country, including a very prominent mosque. They've raided 54 locations across Germany, and they're part of an investigation of a Hamburg-based organization suspected of promoting the Iranian leadership's ideology and supporting activities of Iran-backed terrorist group Hezbollah in Germany. So Germany actually found some guts here in the midst of letting Iran, do backdoor wars by proxy. Is there anything the international community would ever even do about this particular type of warfare?
It's interesting. I mean, if you examine U.S. Foreign policy history, even going back into the Reagan administration, you'll find that there were things done to, we know the whole thing with Iran-Contra, and we can argue about whether that was pro-Iranian or anti-communist, but it was clear that money, substantial amounts of money were funneled to Iran, even under the Ayatollahs, even after Iran, through Hezbollah, had attacked and bombed the U.S. barracks in Beirut that killed 230 or 40 U.S. Marines in 1982. So this has been a longstanding thing in U.S. politics. I will say, if you want to bring it forward to the present, excuse me, the Kamala Harris is more pro-Iran than Barack Obama.
Wow. You want to talk about the remaking, what do they call it, a total makeover?
The remaking of Kamala Harris?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's, I could use some very descriptive terms for her. I don't know that those are appropriate on a Christian radio podcast.
Probably not. Yeah.
Given her past conduct, just look up her photos in history. And I'm watching, so I always sort of look at MSNBC when I wake up in the morning because it's cheaper than coffee to get me going.
You're brave. You're so brave, John.
But I'm telling you, over the last 3 days, what I have noticed is a complete remaking of Kamala Harris into something that I don't even recognize as the Kamala Harris that I've seen in politics for years. So here is a lady who has never received a single vote in a Democratic primary for president, is now being lionized as the most intelligent crime fighting prosecutor person ever. And by the way, her comments to Bibi Netanyahu yesterday after his speech, or after their meeting, following his speech on Wednesday, I would have walked out of the room if I was Bibi. But he has to work with her because she may end up being president. I mean, she's leading in some of the polls now. This is, and you're seeing a propaganda gaslighting operation like I've never seen in my life.
Amen to that. And what about the fundraising, John? Because, Trump is questioning how, can she just appropriate all this money that was raised in good faith, I use that term loosely, for Joe Biden, and now there's $92 million that all of a sudden goes in her coffers, and then they're saying she raised another $100 million. Is that gaslighting too, where basically she just stole what was already in the coffers? There's lawsuits. I mean, Trump is suing over this. Is it legal?
Everybody said a week ago that this was not legal.
Okay.
That the funds could not go from the Biden campaign to anybody else. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean anything to the Democrats. And so my concern is, given some of the recent Supreme Court rulings, which we should probably, I don't think I've been on since those came down.
Right.
I'm not sure that the Trump campaign, my suspicion is that the Trump campaign may be found to not have standing to challenge this, which doesn't seem right. Like, if they don't have standing, standing is sort of a legal term of art that you have to have skin in the game. Mm-hmm. So in late, what month is this? July. In late June or early July, near the end of the Supreme Court term, there was a decision on the censorship panels that had been set up by the government to kind of control what was said on social media. That was challenged in court by a bunch of state attorney generals and went to the Supreme Court in a 6-3 decision. The three liberal lunatics on the court, Ketanji Brown Jackson, Elena Kagan, and Sotomayor, along with Chief Justice Roberts, Amy Coney Barrett, and Brett Kavanaugh, ruled that we don't know if this is wrong or not, but you don't have standing to challenge this.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's interesting.
So, excuse me, I've just, this doesn't happen the whole time I'm not, and I had COVID about a month ago, so I still have a lingering cough, so I'm going to mute my mic here a couple times. So
yeah, no problem.
Go ahead.
No problem. We were talking about Kamala Harris. The great makeover. That's just been sort of stunning because I don't think she has two brain cells to rub together, but that's just me. Anything else about Israel? I know we talked about, you and I mentioned the anti-Semitism of Tucker Carlson. I think that is just so disturbing. He quotes certain pastors, and when he article here about Tucker Carlson's pastor from Bethlehem as the high priest of anti-Semitic Christianity. And it starts out, when Tucker Carlson said he wanted to know how the government of Israel treats Christians, he opted against interviewing Israeli Christians. He chose instead to speak to a Palestinian Christian pastor who founded an anti-Israel organization and justified Hamas's attack on Israel. I like listening to Tucker. I think he has complete thoughts on a lot of things, but the anti-Semitism, John, is really disturbing. What are your thoughts on that?
There's a growth of this. I'll refer you to an article that came out this week that I thought was just absolutely excellent on this issue. And it was an article, was an interview with Trevor Loudon, who I know you know,
yep. Mm-hmm.
On the Red Green Alliance, and the growing pro-Russian communist view called anti-war that's appearing on all these right-wing channels. And I would include Tucker Carlson within that. So just to recap, Tucker Carlson did an interview with Munther Isaac. Munther Isaac is one of the founders of a thing called Christ at the Checkpoint. He's very pro-Palestinian. He is a leftist, Marxist, Palestinian liberation theologian, very much in line with the Pope. If you remember when the Pope went to Israel in 2014, he went to Nativity Square and he did a mass in front of a mural that had the baby Jesus wrapped in a Palestinian keffiyeh, that scarf that they have. by the way, if you unpack the meaning of that scarf, the Palestinian scarf you see everybody wearing in these protests, it really means from those lines are for a fishing net. And so it incorporates this from the river to the sea idea that they get, that they want to eradicate Israel, not live at peace with Israel, eradicate Israel. So the Pope did that, Mother Isaac did that. And then a few days ago, Tucker Carlson did an interview with John Rich. And look, John Rich came out as I don't support the preacher of rapture. And everybody got their knickers in a knot, as they would say, about the attack on the preacher of rapture. But I think everybody missed the most important part of that interview was consistent with Tucker's anti-Israel viewpoint. They said that, and so Rich says, that Darby and Schofield, whoever it was, they worked with the Rothschilds, the Jews, to get this view of the preacher of rapture published in the Schofield Study Bible or Reference Bible. It's a complete, total lie. There is absolutely no proof of that. Tucker then leapt onto that statement by John Rich and said, yes, and this has had massive implications on our foreign policy. What Tucker meant there was, it's terrible that we've become pro-Israel in our foreign policy, and thousands of people have died as a result. This is anti-Israel. A former Fox insider told me it was well known that Tucker is not in favor of Israel. He is anti-Israel. He never discussed Israel in a positive light in all of his years on Fox. And I love a lot of what Tucker Carlson does, but I'm seeing this interview with Rich, and almost simultaneously, Tucker is front and center stage at the Republican National Convention doing a support. And what I'm seeing is this rise in anti-Semitism and outright Jew hatred on a lot of right-wing channels that I would normally agree with. And I said this when the war started. In fact, I said this on October 8th in my prophecy update, the day after the attack happened by Hamas in Gaza. I said that the issue of Israel would be the most divisive issue in the evangelical church until Jesus returns. And I stand by that. And we're seeing that. And so I'm concerned, and I see some things that Trump is doing. Honestly, I understand the concept of peace and the Abraham Accords and everything, but we know Bible prophecy. We know what Bible prophecy says about these fake peace agreements, one of them will be really fake. We don't know which one yet, and it's going to lead to a major conflagration that sort of culminates in the return of Jesus, coming back as a warrior, by the way, not as some little guy milquetoast guy walking around Israel. That's not how Jesus returns. So, I mean, we need to talk about this in the church, I think.
Yeah.
But this is going to be the most divisive issue until the Lord returns, in my opinion, the issue of Israel. Yeah. And we saw some of that this week. We see it in our politics. 100 Democratic congressmen and senators boycotted Netanyahu's speech before the Congress the other day. One showed up, Rashida Tlaib, having you're committing genocide or something, little sign.
She had the headscarf. She had the headscarf on. Yeah. Yeah,
but that's right. And that headscarf, understand it, the subtext meaning in that is from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. This is a big issue. We had the International Court of Justice ruling the other day about Israel is occupying illegally the areas of what is called the West Bank. It's really biblical Judea and Samaria. It was never called the West Bank till the Palestinians were created by the Russians back in 1964. And now it's a big issue. I'm very concerned with where this is going. And I don't know if we have time coming up to a break or not, but there was an article in the Jerusalem Post yesterday. There was a Jewish or an American comedian went to Ramallah. That's the head capital of the Palestinian Authority. It's 5 miles from the Temple Mount, roughly 5 miles, maybe 6. He started interviewing people on the street. Every single person he talked to and interviewed on and off camera said they love Hamas. They agree with what Hamas has done. They support Hamas. They do not think the hostages should be returned. Every single person on the street. And as he was doing this interview, he asked one guy, he says, well, do you know how many times Israel is mentioned in the Quran? And the guy looked at him like, well, it can't be mentioned in the Quran because we hate Israel as Muslims. It's mentioned over 100 times in the Quran. Jerusalem is never mentioned in the Quran.
Right.
Israel is, the Jews are. And so what's happened over the last 60 years now, is this propaganda thing. On my shelf here, I have a reprint of a publication that was done by the Muslim Walk. That would be the Hajj Aman al-Husseini's organization in 1924. In this publication, it says, the association of the Temple Mount, or the Temple Mount being the site of Solomon's temple, cannot be questioned. Now they say it never existed. Mm-hmm. And we have Christians running around saying, oh, that's not really the Temple Mount. There's this campaign to erase the history of the Temple Mount. And Mary, I got to tell you, I was there about 1.5 years ago, and I went down, first time I ever done this, into the Western Wall tunnels tour. Mm-hmm. That anyone would question that this is the Temple Mount that existed at the time of Herod and Solomon, expanded by Herod greatly, is beyond my comprehension.
Yeah.
And it plays into the fake Palestinian, or Fakistinian, if you want to call that, Fakistinian propaganda that we're seeing all the time, and is now being used to foment war against Israel. This is why they came across the border. Zareed Zahavi from Alma, she made a very interesting point. If you want to, everybody says, well, what is Hezbollah's battle plan? Okay. Hezbollah's fired by 10,000 rockets into Israel since October 7th in the north. Wow. And what was Hezbollah's battle plan? She said Hezbollah's battle plan was to come through tunnels and do exactly in the north of Israel what Hamas did in Gaza, in the Gaza region. Israel has 80,000 people in the north that have evacuated 45 villages and towns. Kiryat Shimona, I've been there, 25,000 people. 25,000 people. The town is completely emptied out, and much of it has been decimated by rocket and mortar attacks from Hezbollah. And now what Hezbollah is doing is they're expanding the reach of their rockets. A couple months ago, late February, there was a poster that appeared in Palestinian Square in Tehran. By the way, in Farsi, Palestinian Square is pronounced Philistinian Square.
Interesting.
You see that, and by the way, in Turkey, that's also in Turkish language. That's also how you say Palestine, Philistine. Yeah. And on it said, so we know they have 80,000 evacuated, living in hotels. Those children were just told the other day, you will not go to school this year again for the second year in a row.
Wow. From
the parents of those kids. They can't handle it. And the poster in Hebrew in Palestinian Square in Tehran said, are you guys ready for 2 million displaced people in the north of Israel?
Wow, John, we have to take a break here, and we're going to continue this when we come back. Very, very interesting. I want to ask also about Israel, the Knesset voting against a two-state solution and how the Democrats are unraveling over that. So more with John Haller. 2 minutes.
Q90 FM presents the Police Lights of Christmas, helping over 70 police departments across Wisconsin.
Each department is going to leave this night with a box full of thousands of dollars worth of gift cards.
Visit lightsofchristmas.us. Police Lights of Christmas, a ministry of Q90 FM.
Feedback, questions, and topic suggestions are always appreciated. Email us at comments@standupforthetruth.com.
Welcome back to Stand Up for the Truth for this Friday in July, the last Friday in July. We're speaking with John Haller today, and we were just talking before the break about Israel and this economic and humanitarian disaster that is in the north of Israel right now. People are staying in hotels, 80,000 people. I don't know who's paying for all that, if the government is paying for that. But, John, you wanted to finish up your thought on where we left off at the break.
That the bills are being paid by the Israeli government.
Okay.
So this is having a huge economic impact. Just to sort of close the circle a little bit, I interviewed Avraham Levine, who's one of the researchers at Alma a few months ago. And I asked him, I said, what happens if war breaks out in the north? And he said, no Israeli child will go to school anywhere in Israel for a year because the rockets can reach all the way to the south of the country that they have. And many of those are precision guided. And so, everybody got upset when Iran launched 300 missiles and drones. The Hezbollah could do 5,000 to 10,000 a day for weeks. Mm-hmm. There's no way that they have. Now, there's some hope that Israel's going to release soon for field use its Iron Beam, which is a laser thing. So instead of spending $50,000 to $100,000 a missile for an Iron Dome missile, the Iron Beam would be able to take these missiles out for like $14. So it's the economics are incredible, and they're doing the same thing. The Houthis, they're launching these $10,000 missiles, and we're using the U.S. when we ever do decide to get involved. We're using $2 million missiles to shoot them down. The economics on that don't work, and so Iran is the whole face of warfare in the world has changed. But back to this guy who was the American guy who was interviewing people in Ramallah. He was interviewing these people. He was getting them to say what they said. And suddenly a group of 9 or 10 Palestinian men approached him and said, delete everything on your phone. Show us that you're deleting it or we'll kill you. Mm-hmm. This is I'm telling you, this is in Ramallah, 5 or 6 miles from the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And so surveys are done by people that I've worked with, Israeli Defense and Security Forum and some others. They interview Arabs and do surveys, and they found support for Hamas is somewhere in the 85% range within what we would call the West Bank. And so even Trump is making statements. I'm very bothered by this, that, just get me in there and we'll make peace in a week.
Yeah. He did say that.
The two-state solution is insane. So another thing I need to say here, the International Court of Justice ruling a week ago Friday, they release it on Friday, late in the day, because they know that Israel is going on Shabbat, and they take a day of rest on Shabbat from Friday evening to Saturday evening. So they know that they'll have at least 24 hours of that circulating through the press before anyone in Israel will respond. Mm-hmm. Now, fortunately, some people respond. There's a superb lawyer in the UK. Her name is Natasha Hausdorff. Just look her up on YouTube. Hausdorff. Natasha Hausdorff. Okay. She's with UK Lawyers for Israel Charitable Trust. She gives lawyers a good name, in my opinion. She is articulate, intelligent, and has all the arguments about why the ICJ ruling is completely against international law. And I also want to say the ruling of the ICJ is really a court ruling that adopts UN Resolution 2334, which was introduced at the Security Council of the UN in December of 2016. And for the first time, an anti-Israel resolution at the Security Council was not vetoed by the U.S. And you can go and you can find all the articles about it. I've covered it extensively. Samantha Power, who, by the way, who was the UN ambassador at the time, gave a ridiculous support of 2334, which says that Israel is illegally occupying. It's completely against international law. And Samantha Power is still around running USAID agency for relief that is given to these terrorists in Gaza and in the areas governed by the Palestinian, controlled by the Palestinian Authority. This is Obama 3.0. And Kamala Harris will be Obama 4.0. So I guess we would call it the Okamala administration if heaven forbid it comes in.
Well, and John, the Knesset voted against a two-state solution. I would guess the Democrats, they have enough to unravel over. This kind of sent them a little bit over the edge, I think, too. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I sort of Jesus told us there would be earthquakes in diverse places in Matthew chapter 24 in the end times. And we always say, well, that's, certainly there are geographic increase in earthquakes, but I'm talking about geopolitical earthquakes. What the Israeli Knesset did a week ago Wednesday, voting 68-9 against a two-state solution. Now, there are 120 Knesset members, so only 77 voted.
Okay.
So that means that there were 43 that didn't have the courage to show up to even vote and make a statement with their vote. But that was the first time the Israeli Knesset has ever done that. That goes completely against the international narrative that there can be some kind of two-state solution. It's insanity. And so I would put that as about a 9.0 geopolitical earthquake.
Wow.
That's how I would view it. I mean, that will send shockwaves throughout the international community. And so, there's all this statement about, Netanyahu doesn't have a plan. He did present his plan to Congress. May not like it. It may not be as complicated as you think it is, like defeat Gaza and we govern Gaza for the long time foreseeable future until we can change people's hearts and minds. Because if you look at an organization like, I think it comes out of the Scandinavian country, Denmark or Norway or Sweden, Impact-SE, go look that up. They have all of the texts that are being used in these UNRWA sponsored schools in Gaza, in the area governed by the Palestinian Authority, and they are, they use a math example. So let's say you have 5 Jews and you chop off the heads of 4 of them. How many Jews do you have left? I mean, that's a simplified version of the math problem, but that's exactly what they're like. And that's what the kids are taught in school. And so it's sort of like the abortion thing here in the United States. We thought when Roe versus Wade overturned, gave the states the right to shut down abortions. And there was a decrease for a year, but, and I don't know if you talked about this with Ms. Appling from Wisconsin Right to Life the other day. There were more, it looks like in 2024, we're on more track for more abortions in the United States than ever in its history.
Wow.
That's after Roe versus Wade. And what's the problem? We have 50 years of people being indoctrinated that a woman's right to choose is the preeminent thing over the life of a child. And you don't overcome that in a year. So these are all long-term fights that we're in. And so Israel's facing a similar long-term fight with regard to how the Arabs that live in Gaza and the Arabs in the Judea and Samaria largely think. They hate Israel. They hate Jews. They don't think that Israel has a right to exist. And you should see my Twitter feed. The sewage, the sewage flow of anti-Israel, anti-Jew hatred is unbelievable. And what did we see in Washington? We saw Palestinian protesters, Hamas protesters, defacing monuments, a replica of the Liberty Bell. And there were a few arrested for attacking police. And guess what? They've all been released now.
Of course. I didn't see much footage of that. We were just talking before the show, someone here in the building, that I hardly saw any footage of that.
Yeah, there's some, you have to kind of dig through Twitter for it. And by the way, so they all get released. And what happened in New York City? Monday or Tuesday. A lady who prayed and shared the gospel outside an abortion clinic in New York City was charged and convicted under the FACE Act, the Federal Access to Clinic Act, or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
She was sentenced to 41 months in federal prison for supposedly blocking access. They said violently. I'm telling you, you want to see violent protests? Go look at what the Hamas people were doing and the vandalism that they did. Pro-life people do not do that. They may sit in a hallway and pray. Right. And they're going to prison for years because of that, including, I think, the lady you mentioned who's like 76 with health problems.
Paulette.
What did she get, 2 years?
Yeah, Paulette Harlow. On May 31st, Judge Colleen Collar-Cotelli sentenced Paulette Harlow to 2 years in federal prison and 36 months of supervised release for violating the FACE Act. And then this judge, this judge, she says, I would suggest that because the husband was pleading for leniency because they need each other. They are elderly couple. She said, I would suggest that in terms of your religion, that one of the tenets is that you should make the effort during this period of time when it may be difficult in terms of for your husband to make every effort to remain alive, to do the things you need to do to survive, because that's part of the tenets of your religion. I don't know if that's the most cynical,
do you
nasty.
know what the husband offered to do? He offered, put me in prison with her.
Oh, right. I did hear that. Yeah.
So I can take care of her. And you know that, listen, this lawfare thing that we've seen.
Yeah.
We've seen it with the way they're attacking Trump. And we see it in Israel with the way they're attacking Netanyahu. Do you like Netanyahu or not? They've weaponized the legal system. They've changed America into something that I do not really recognize. Yeah. I mean, I was just telling you, I was trying to post, I did a podcast yesterday with somebody in the UK, and I tried to post it on Facebook. It got blocked 4 times. The post was removed 4 times by Facebook this morning. Wow. For violating community standards. You posted it, John, because it appears that you're trying to get likes. By the way, most of my podcasts don't get a large number of likes because I think I try to tell the truth, and that offends a lot of people. So anyway.
Wow. Wow, just amazing times. I know that the Planned Parenthood went to the Supreme Court in Wisconsin and said, will you please find where we can, have put in our Constitution that they can have abortion, because there's a law in the books from the 19th century, mid-19th century, that it's illegal. And so Planned Parenthood is trying to get our Supreme Court to find something. In other words, the Supreme Court isn't going to just interpret the law. They are going to legislate on behalf of Planned Parenthood. And Julane and the pro-life groups in Wisconsin aren't even allowed a seat at the table, which shouldn't surprise any of us. But
because they don't have standing.
Yes.
That's the new way to prevent conservatives from participating in the process. That's
crazy. Before we go here today, John, we have several minutes left, of course. We have about 10 minutes left. But I want to talk about France because the Olympics start today. I had said on this program that they committed electoral suicide this month because Marine Le Pen, the conservative, had won the June parliamentary election. She won a majority. Macron, who's supposedly a centrist and current president of France, decided he didn't like that. We got to keep the right out at any cost. Sounds very familiar. So then he called new elections. That's just so tyrannical. But Jean-Luc Mélenchon is the new Popular Front Party. He got, I don't know if he got a majority, but he got more seats. And Macron lost some seats. But he doesn't care about that. Anything to make France left again. So that is one issue. Now they have a tremendous amount of immigration over there. One of the right wing, I hate that phrase. One of the right wing senators said, we have committed suicide because there are enough immigrants now in France. The same number of the population of Marseille is how many immigrants we have here in France, and we are really going to pay a high price for this. It's just an absolute disaster, John, because when the left takes over, they destroy everything that they touch. Anything about what's going on in France politically or go ahead.
France is in really kind of a meltdown because as Macron, when he called the snap, I think they call them snap
elections, right?
Because he thought he could win and control everything and shut out the Marie Le Pen, who looked like she was on track to get the majority.
Yep.
and may even become the prime minister or whatever. He wanted to prevent that, so he made an alliance with these left-wing parties. And you need to understand, the left wing in France is not really friendly to the common people. If you remember the French Revolution ended up with a group of people called the Jacobins, and the Jacobins beheaded, it's estimated in the mid 1800s, over a period of time, 300,000 people in France. Just process this. So this is the progeny of the Jacobins, and we have them here in the United States. They do things like, get elected to vice president and then become the president of appears to be the presidential candidate, radical left-wing people like Kamala Harris. So they have a massive problem in the UK. They have a massive problem in Scandinavian countries. They have a massive problem in Germany with this immigration. If we remember, that was about 8 or 9 years ago that all those males, mostly males, 80-90% males, came in. They brought their families in. They are having children. They're upsetting the demographic balance of the country.
Right.
And do people think that this is not going to have an impact? It's unbelievable. And so, but listen, what's been going on in the United States we don't talk about. We had someone who was called the border czar who didn't do anything to shut down immigration or make any suggestions about it publicly. Now she's a presidential candidate, and the gaslighting today is, well, she was never the border czar.
Yeah,
she was just to give her opinion on a couple of small minor issues. Well, she never even did that. So so we're being gaslit. But in France, they have a massive problem. And this morning, the Olympics are starting, I don't know, today, tomorrow.
Today, yeah.
The high-speed rail network in France was shut down by coordinated, simultaneous arson attacks all over the country. And so, for example, the team from the Olympic team from the UK was supposed to come through the channel under the English Channel by train. All those trains have been canceled. And so everything's been thrown into disarray. There was a French member of parliament who got up the other day and said, you Israeli athletes, you should not come. It is not safe for you to come to France to the Olympics.
Seriously?
And so now they said they've ramped up security, but that seems to be a bit of a hollow promise when your high-speed rail network gets shut down in the morning. And who did the attacks? Well, I don't know. I'm sure there will be people saying that it was Donald Trump or something. But somebody did a coordinated attack on the French rail system, and it's a massive problem. So I'm fearful that we're going to see a repeat of 1972 Munich.
I was thinking about that this week, actually, because this is the first time they've had Olympics there in 100 years. And Jean, I want to circle back a little bit about this Marxist Mélenchon, who won so many seats and took some from Macron. There were a lot of backroom deals here, and now he is saying that he expects to become the Prime Minister of France. I know Marine Le Pen wanted to be the president in 2027, if at all possible. This guy is a huge power grab going on over there. Same with the UK.
He will do everything to keep Marie Le Pen from doing anything.
Anybody but her. And then they investigated her. She was hit by a shock probe into 2022 presidential campaign funding, even though she says we told everyone what we were doing. We went through all the right hoops. We did everything legally. And now they're pulling a Trump on Marine Le Pen so they can tie her up in the courts as long as possible so that she is completely hamstrung to be able to do anything for
They
her
have
party.
figured out how to do lawfare.
Yeah, pretty much that's it.
They're doing it against Israel at the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court, who's threatening to issue arrest warrants for Bibi Netanyahu.
Yeah.
I mean, by the way, Mary, did you see what they did in Washington, D.C.? I mean, we haven't even talked about the Trump assassination attempt yet, but the security situation, I have a head of state come. They broke into the Watergate Hotel where Netanyahu was staying, and they filled the conference rooms and other places in the hotel with maggots and mosquitoes.
I haven't heard that.
Yeah, there are pictures all over Twitter about it. That was Hamas supporters, anti-Israel, Jew-hating supporters that did that at the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C., when they know that the security situation with Netanyahu is very serious.
Wow.
Now, they knew the situation, the threats against Trump were very serious too. And I watched the congressional hearing with the Cheadle, the head of the now former head of the Secret Service.
Yeah.
It was maybe the worst performance of anybody in politics or government that I've ever seen in my life.
I was yelling at the TV. Yeah,
I know, and I don't care whether you like Trump or not. I would be upset if this had happened to Biden or even Harris. This should not happen in America. We should not assassinate or try to assassinate political rivals.
Well, John,
but it's happening throughout American history.
And Christopher Wray says, well, no, it's just a little shrapnel that jumped up onto his ear. That wasn't really a bullet at all. What? Wow.
Time magazine has a big article out. I haven't had a chance to read it. It just hit my feed about what do we know about the Trump assassination attempt and what took out his ear. Was it just shrapnel or was it a bullet? Time's conclusion, by the way, Christopher Wray, maybe you should hire the people who Time magazine talked to because they said it was a bullet.
Yeah.
Hey, Christopher Wray, I'm just there. And now you're going to make me start yelling.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, it's just absolute insanity. And when Nancy Mace, who, I liked her approach, a very direct approach, the gal from South Carolina, she said, okay, yes or no. To Kimberly Cheadle, yes or no, yes or no. What I wish she would have said is, do you hate Donald Trump, yes or no? Because to me, that's part of the hand that she's holding. I believe that. It's just that it can't come out or it won't come out. But that's what I would have asked her, yes or no, do you hate Donald Trump? Because that's, to me, what underlies all of this.
Well, and it's hard to figure out what happened on July 13th in Butler, Pennsylvania. Mary, you were alive. Well, you probably weren't old enough. I was 9 years old when JFK got assassinated. And that day, the FBI and Texas police were holding up, this is the gun. Have you seen the gun? Have you seen anything about the bullets? Have you seen any autopsy reports or anything about anything that happened in Butler, Pennsylvania?
Yeah.
No. Why not? It's been 2 weeks.
Wow.
On one of the most, somebody made an interesting comment the other day. They tried to take out Trump by putting him in prison. They tried to remove him from the ballot. All of those failed. And so they're trying to take him out. And it's interesting, I know Bill Koenig, and I subscribe to Bill's theory about you do something to Israel and God will deal with you.
Right.
What has Joe Biden tried to do for 4 years? That he's been 3.5 years he's been in office. He's tried to remove Bibi Netanyahu from office.
Right.
And now he's gone. Wow. Maybe there's something there.
I like your definition of earthquakes, John. I think we need to revisit what that is in the original Greek.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's sort of a pattern, and it's sort of like a lot of times in the Jewish scriptures, there's things there's kind of a surface meaning. But then when you unpack it, there's a much deeper meaning to it. So I don't know. That's that was written in Greek, but it was written by Hebrew people.
Yeah.
So
okay, all right. Well, there you go. Wow, we only have 2 minutes left. Netanyahu, deep state in Israel, John. There has to be a deep state in Israel like there is here. Any 2-minute thoughts on that?
They've come after him on these ridiculous prosecutions, and also what's happened in Israel is the Israeli Supreme Court. Israel's Supreme Court has been able to put itself into a place where they're sort of a self-perpetuating leftist organization.
Right.
And when Netanyahu's coalition tried to deal with that, there were protests all over Israel.
Yeah.
My view right now is there's a lot of talk about everybody in our government, Kamala Harris and everything, is against settlements. The settlements. How dare Jews live in historical Judea and Samaria? And my view is for every city that Israel has had to evacuate in the north, Israel ought to take like 2 or 3 times that amount of land in the areas of the West Bank and establish settlements. Do a tit for tat. And it'll cause. There's going to be war over there in some of my sources are saying there could be war in the next few days. And my concern is that I think Israel prevails, but there will be a lot of pain. One of the experts I follow, Mary Danielsen, with the Institute for Counterterrorism at Washington University, she says, in the initial stages of the war, Israel could expect 200 dead people per day.
Wow. John Haller, thank you so much. What a packed hour of information. There's so much more we could talk about. So I really appreciate you, John, and we'll talk again next month and see where we're at on all this.
Thank you, Mary.
All right. Wow, it wasn't that long ago. We were talking about the Supreme Court agitation last September in Israel, almost a year ago, and now the war has just taken over everything. So pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Pray for Israel and her leaders. And let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to which you were also called in one body, and be thankful. Colossians 3:15. Have a great weekend. Keep your eyes on the skies.